What's up guys, it's Lord Botha here with another video, and let them eat Switch Ones. That is the message from the boss of Nintendo America, and I have to say, it really feels like they must have hired the PR team that did Disney's Snow White film that just came out, or maybe the guys who did Assassin's Creed Shadows for Ubisoft, because every single step this company seems to be taking in the rollout of the Switch 2 seems to be leaning it from bad to worse. First, we'll get this story out of the way here. Nintendo Switch 2 tariff pre-order delay hits Canada too. That comes to us from IGN, and yes, it seems that Nintendo has not just decided to delay the console's pre-orders here in the States, they're also delaying pre-orders for Canada. Now, of course, their justification for this is, well, they're all going to North America. It's the same continent, and we don't want to make two trips, I guess. So the pre-order dates have to be the same for both countries. I guess there's no word yet on Mexico. Personally, I think this is just a way to try to make the US look bad. Canada, if you haven't been keeping up on the news, isn't exactly friendly with us right now. Mostly because they're mad about tariffs of their own being put on them. So the best way that Nintendo can give the United States the finger with these tariffs is by driving a deeper wedge between the countries culturally by now making the US the country that's blamed for delays in pre-orders in Canada. Maybe I'm being conspiratorial there, but makes sense to me. And as we all know, Nintendo can be petty at times. I'll tell you to go look at the Pal World lawsuits that are going on to confirm that. What's up guys, Future Lord Botha here, and a lot has happened concerning the tariffs since I filmed that part of this video, which is crazy seeing that it was only like 2 days ago. But in that time, Donald Trump has essentially put a 90-day pause on those tariffs going out to other countries. That said, there's no real news yet about how the launch or pre-orders are going to be affected for the Switch here in the United States and in Canada based upon that 90-day ease up of the tariffs. As you may remember, today is April 10th here in the States. Pre-orders were supposed to go up yesterday, the 9th, and as of right now, it seems pre-orders aren't up yet. So it's all a little still up in the air. Secondly, there's a story going around right now saying that because of the 104% tariffs that Trump put on China, and actually ended up being 125% tariffs, I believe, well, because of that, Nintendo has decided to cancel the release of the Nintendo Switch in China. However, the Switch 2 not being released in China doesn't really have anything to do with tariffs. The news just kind of came out on the same day. Because, and this comes to us from VGC, Nintendo won't be releasing Switch 2 in China yet, as it reportedly analyzes demand. Which, by the way, in China, Nintendo Switch is sold in collaboration with Tencent. Yeah, Tencent. We're hearing their name more and more now when it comes to video game business, aren't we? But the gist of the article basically says that Nintendo isn't sure that they're ever going to release the Switch 2 in China, mostly because the Switch 1 wasn't released immediately in China. They don't know exactly how much demand there is for the Switch 2 based upon sales of the Switch in China. China is an extremely competitive mobile game market where people play games on their phones just as much as they play PC games or console games, maybe even more. So putting your handheld in that already extremely competitive market with phone games is not really something they seem to be looking to do, as well as the fact that Nintendo has raised some concerns and problems in the past with a certain governmental restrictions that have been put on Nintendo and the Switch and the way it operates in China, which is also why the Nintendo Switch e-store is actually shutting down really soon. But the second and bigger piece of news is this statement that came from Doug Bowser, and he is aptly named there because just like his namesake in Mario, he seems to be an enemy of the people, or at least the consumers and customers of Nintendo. Because, and this comes to us from Culture Crave via Twitter, Nintendo boss Doug Bowser on the Switch 2's price. Quote, "Some people may not be able to afford it. That's why we wanted to make sure the other Switch platform is available. Holy shit, bro. This guy pulled a Don Matrick. For those of you who don't know, Don Matrick, as you see him here, was the head honcho, the guy at Microsoft for Xbox before Phil Spencer arrived at the company. He was an industry guy. He worked at EA. He had a legacy. And he threw it all away by being a complete and total PR nightmare with horrible ideas. This is the guy who gave us the Xbox Kinect, which was supposed to be a rival to the Wii, and Matrick introduced it by saying that a lot of people see controllers as a barrier into gaming, despite the fact that the Wii, which was outselling 360 at this point, had a controller. Anyway, the Kinect was a complete terrible disaster, which is the same kind of camera system, by the way, that they're actually putting into the Switch 2 now. The motion sensors for precise motion didn't work correctly at all. Then there was the disaster of the Xbox One launch, which if you didn't know or were always curious, why Xbox One? Well, it's because Xbox One was supposed to be an all-in-one system. They wanted it to be a entertainment system, not just a video game console, which was a stupid idea. You know how Elon Musk always says he wants X, or what was Twitter, to be the everything app? Well, they wanted Xbox One to be the everything station. Play video games, watch TV, watch movies, go on the internet, all that stuff. And they decided to introduce this by showing mostly TV off. It didn't go over well because there wasn't a lot of video games being shown on what was thought to be a video game system. They also brought back the Kinect, which again wasn't going to ever do well because it was based off of a system that already failed, even though it was supposed to be enhanced now or whatever. And the main thing that people griped about this system was the fact that it had always online capability, which meant that you were always on the internet. You always had to have online connectivity to use the system. And when people complained about this and Don Matrick was asked about it in an interview, he responded with this quote: "Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360, which you may notice is eerily similar to what Bowser is saying here. They're both essentially saying, hey, you can't afford it or you don't like this feature or whatever, go use the old one. Get out of here. We don't want you. We don't want your business. We already got it once, and if you don't like what we're putting out, who cares?" That's very pro-consumer. Real way to increase your sales. By the way, if you do some just light research into Doug Bowser, you'll find out that he worked at Electronic Arts between 2007 and 2015, and he served as Vice President of Global Demand Planning, which encompasses a lot. Basically, future sales plans, forecasts, the actual logistics of rolling out product to actual countries to be sold. It's almost like head of both sales and operations. It's a big hat to wear. And interestingly enough, while Bowser was there between 2007 and 2015, that's when game series like Dragon Age and Mass Effect started to take off, which were phenomenal games. Personally, Mass Effect 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. I think it's damn near a perfect game. But also, those game series had a lot of paid DLC, a lot of microtransactions. In Dragon Age Origins even, there were characters that if you didn't have certain DLC and you talked to those characters, if you progressed a little bit in the conversation, they would take you to the store from that conversation to a page where you could purchase the DLC. This is also the era when FIFA introduced a little something called Ultimate Team. And Ultimate Team was a microtransaction farm, essentially. But this was the era, 2007 to 2015, when microtransactions and paid DLC became very big for the first time at EA. And then Bowser leaves in 2015, and where does he go? He goes to Nintendo. Now Nintendo is putting out the Switch 2, and guess what they're doing? Add-ons, microtransactions, sales packages, scaled pricing for different games, which That's a wild concept to me. Some games are going to cost $60 or whatever, or $50. Some games are going to cost $80 or $90. It all just depends on what we feel the game is worth or how much work has been put into the game. That's like if theaters said, oh, Disney spent $300 million on making Snow White, so the tickets are going to be $60 a person. But Disney also spent $150 to like $180 million on making Moana 2. So those tickets are going to be $40 a person. We would think that's absolutely crazy. Though, to be honest, with the state of theaters as it is, they might actually start doing something like that. Which, again, is crazy. Ridiculous. You shouldn't accept it. And you wouldn't accept it if they came out and started saying they were going to do that. Just like you shouldn't accept it here with video games. But beyond what Bowser has said or even his background as to why Nintendo just want to charge you more money because they want more money, there's also some logistical reasons that they could actually be looking at as a company to justify their mindset. Not saying that it's right, but the numbers may have given them some idea that they could have gotten away with this. And all this information comes to us from Start.io, which, to be honest, is an advertising company. But the article they've put together here relies on a lot of charts and information that they've compiled that is really, really good stuff. And it's an article they published in January of 2023 entitled Nintendo Target Market Segmentation Marketing Strategy, Main Competitors, and Statistics, where they really broke down the numbers and what they meant or what Nintendo could be taking away from them. We'll begin with this statement right here, which is who is Nintendo's target market? The Nintendo target market covers a broad age group from kids to older adults, although the largest segment is the millennial generation. Nintendo's target audience is located worldwide, with the biggest audience in the Americas, which is probably why they are really salty about the tariffs from the United States, because they know us Americans, we love to get our hands on some Nintendos, especially apparently our millennial generation. Both men and women are Nintendo customers in more or less equal measure. Typically, I would say I don't really believe that when it comes to console gaming, but this is a handheld console. Women tend to be more interested in handheld games rather than console games or PC games. That's why that deceptive number you always see in every article published by frickin' publications like Kotaku saying, oh, well, 50% of gamers are actually women. That's not actually true because the numbers are also considering mobile game players who skew heavily female. The vast majority of people playing video games on their phones or tablets are children or, more likely, women. But yeah, in this case, I believe it because men, they like Nintendo. There are a lot of men who are legacy Nintendo players, played Nintendo as a kid. The Switch is the new latest system that Nintendo is going with. Seems like they're going to stick with it. So if you want to play Nintendo, Switch is going to be the way they go. Women, they prefer handheld gaming. And let's be honest, they tend to like the cutesy animation style of Nintendo characters more than the more realistic animation style of games coming from Xbox or especially PlayStation. Nintendo customers tend to be playful and optimistic. That's not really surprising. They are both hardcore gamers as well as casual gamers. And there's a reason for that, and it's in this next sentence. Unlike competitors, women and families are an important part of the overall Nintendo target market. So the intended market for Nintendo is not just men, but more broadly speaking, women and families as well. That's why you can say the game appeals to both hardcore gamers, which tend to skew heavily male, who are competitive with their buddies and want to get together and play Smash Bros. And Mario Kart together, yelling different slurs and epitaphs at each other, while also appealing to casual gamers who tend to skew more towards women and families, i.e. children, which essentially means family game night. Family gets all together, they play Mario Kart together, have a fun, not so stressful time where they compete against each other. Unless you play Mario Kart with my wife's family, in which case it's the former, where we're all screaming slurs and epitaphs at each other. but we're also family. What this proves, though, is that Nintendo knows that their target audience, at least historically, hasn't been just single-player male gamers, but also a giant swath of the people buying their systems are families, where kids are going to play their systems. And so they want to appeal to families and kids. And to appeal to families and kids, they've typically tried to have a lower price point. Times and consoles have changed. Because as you can see here under Nintendo demographic segmentation, it states that although video gaming is often thought of as a favorite activity of kids and teens, 70% of gamers are in fact age 18 and older. The largest user group of Nintendo Switch, the company's most recent and highly popular console, is age 20 to 25, with a significant portion of users well into their mid-40s. This is in contrast to the Nintendo 3DS, which is far more targeted to a younger audience of under 18s. What this really says right here is that the Switch isn't like previous consoles from Nintendo in terms of who it's being marketed to. The Switch isn't really being thought of as having families in mind as much. And maybe that's because people are not having families as much, or they thought they could get more money out of single adult males because these 20 to 25 year olds are going to be single adult males, because I'm willing to bet the majority of those female purchases of Nintendo are mothers buying systems for their kids. And this portion of users that are well into their mid-40s, those are definitely legacy Nintendo players. These are dudes who were playing video games well back to when they were not cool. And they are loyal people to Nintendo. They're not going anywhere. So when Nintendo looks at these numbers, what they're really seeing is we have young adults who are mostly unmarried, without families, and men approaching middle age that have always been loyal to us, and they have disposable income. We need to sell our system to those people, and we need to fleece that demographic as much as possible because they're the ones buying our system. And how are we going to do that since they have a ton of disposable income? By slowly turning up the heat and boiling the money out of them with microtransactions and upgrade packages, etc., etc. The demographics of who plays Nintendo have changed. The demographics of the world really have changed. Families aren't the biggest target audience of Nintendo. So when people say, oh, what about little Timmy and his mom going into the store and wanting a Nintendo Switch 2, and then seeing the ghastly price of it, and then hearing about all the add-ons and the Mario package and etc., etc. Well, the truth is, the Nintendo Switch isn't really being made for them. And I mean, Bowser has pretty much said that. He said if you can't afford it, get the old system. You think he's talking to single dudes with disposable income? No, because they're not the ones that are going to be complaining about the price. Especially those 40-year-old dudes who have been with Nintendo for a very long time. It's the families that are complaining about the price. It's the customers that Nintendo used to base a lot of their business around. Families and kids. But like I said, they're just not the target demo anymore. At least not the big target demo. I'm sure if Nintendo thinks they can still get them, that'd be great. But they are an afterthought to single males with disposable income. That is who the Switch 2 is made for now. The big problem is I don't know if they can actually get over the hurdle of being perceived as a family-friendly console station, because that's the reputation Nintendo has always had. And that is the one thing that I think over time is actually going to do them in terms of sales. Or who knows? Their guess about the demographics could be completely right. I mean, they got deeper financial analyzation than me. So maybe they got enough single males with disposable income to make up the difference. And that will be loyal to them to get them over the hump no matter what. Even in the face of things like emulation that they tried to crack down on hard. But those are just my thoughts on all this. If you have your own thoughts, go ahead and leave them in the comments. If you liked this video, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, I appreciate you watching all of it. We'll talk to you again later.